This podcast is brought to you by partner Mint Mobile. Go to the link in the description to get 50% off their 12-month unlimited plan, and then also use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software at cdkeyoffer.com. We'll talk about these sponsors more later, but for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by my co-host,
Dan.
How you doing, Dan?
Pretty good. Finishing out, or coming off of the holiday season. I think we had a pretty successful holiday, but...
Yeah, I'd say it was one of the more relaxing ones once again this time around, and thank God, because the year has not started off slow.
No, last year was a bit of a whirlwind for us just in our personal lives. So having a nice, relaxing Christmas was nice.
Yeah. Of course, I will bring up that now I have bought a motorcycle again. And so that is half of what I bring up to you now when we play video games.
Is you being like, hey, isn't this motorcycle cool?
Hey, Dan, did you know I rode it again today? But yeah, no, it's been something I've been looking at for a while. It's funny, if anyone remembers who's listening to this podcast, that e-bike ad, just randomly we had an e-bike company sponsor us. That for sure is the thing that made me go, no, I think I want a motorcycle again.
Yes, and that's a very big difference between the two of us. Is you think those are fun and I think those are terrifying. I got on your old motorcycle that you had back before this few years before this channel would have existed.
I had it during the beginning of the channel, but
you pretty much only rode it to my memory. You really only rode it that much when you lived in Detroit.
Oh, no, I rode it a lot when I lived in Peoria. It was a Honda Grom. Now I have a 650cc Royal Enfield Bear, quite a lot faster and bigger. I will say that much. But
and I was scared of shifting. I think I got into second gear on your Grom. And that's where I was like, this is good enough for me. So I have no interest in ever getting on that Enfield, but maybe you'll convince me at some point.
I will have multiple helmets soon. I could maybe convince you to go up and down the street.
We'll see. I actually think I doubt I would be confident enough to do that.
I will say this, if it makes you feel any better, I'm like, this is something my girlfriend said. She feels more comfortable on the motorcycle, even though it's faster, than on the e-bike, because the e-bike just feels like it's a bigger motorcycle than before, so, and the seat's more comfortable. So it feels, I don't want to say more car-like, but that is kind of how you would describe it. You get on it and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel like a death trap as much because it's a little more sturdy. So that might be part of convincing you to risk your life with me.
Probably not. I think it's mostly. I think it's mostly if I'm not in a vehicle with a cabin, I don't really want to go over maybe 20 miles per hour.
We can agree to not go over 20
because
although this will get to 20 in, I mean, a split second, but
because like skiing. Scared of skiing, biking. I can do biking,
but skiing. I mean, that's like how rich white people die. Like, I mean, like there's constant injuries. I knew people at work that, oh, we went skiing. My cousin broke her back and she's okay. Like, it's like because they're going as fast as a motorcycle and they're just kind of hoping snow stops them from dying when they crash.
Yeah, the last time I ever went skiing, I went like 3 or 4 times probably. In the same day, I almost hit my head on a tree because somebody was taking their kid down the center of a ski slope. So just a relatively narrow slope. And hey, why don't I just take my kid that doesn't know how to ski at all down the center of that? And I came around a corner and almost hit my head. And then my friend decided he would try to do a jump and landed on his back, and we were in the hospital for that.
See, this is what I'm saying, though. I wiped out a few times on my last motorcycle, never had to go to the hospital. I continue to, that's skiing, motorcycle danger, except no one seems to know that it is and is not dressed appropriately to ram into a tree or something.
And as a scaredy cat, I am acutely aware of it.
Yes. Okay. Well, it sounds like I'm more likely to convince you to get on the back of the motorcycle at 15 miles an hour than to go down a ski slope. But
probably.
Let us get to the first reader mail here. Bullethead writes in and says, "How do you feel about MSI appropriating NVIDIA from you and Dan?" So, as you might guess, this clicks to a link to a Gamers Nexus video where I guess during an MSI press conference.
The RTX 50 series boasts a revolutionary leap in AI capabilities thanks to NVIDIA. Blackwell architecture.
The MSI guy says NVIDIA. And
which I think vindicates my initial feeling that NVIDIA is the natural way you read that word, even if it's supposed to be said NVIDIA, which I think...
I don't Enfield, EN, or like EN, NVIDIA, END.
I don't think I still do it anymore. Do it that often. I probably slip and say NVIDIA every once in a while. But that's an albatross that's always going to be around our neck, Tom. That we used to say in NVIDIA instead of NVIDIA.
The funny thing is as much as eventually we got good at saying the word correctly, there were many times where no one corrected us. And no offense, everyone listening to this, but most of my friends, and when I say I'm not like one of them's an actuarial, a few of them are doctors. Like I'm saying it's not like it like level of intelligence. Almost everyone I know when they see the word says NVIDIA. Just no offense, everybody. Maybe it's a more Midwestern, Southern thing. I'm sure if you're in Silicon Valley, you're more likely to say that correctly, but.
Well, the words in the English language don't typically just start with an N and then immediately jump to a V. So forgive us for that error we made 6 years ago.
But in defense of ourselves and this guy who works at MSI, a lot of people say it that way until you correct them. And anyone who wants to make fun of us, do it. Start a podcast and record thousands of hours of yourself, put it online. You will be surprised how many things you say wrong. It is what it is.
Or are just regionally pronounced slightly differently that people say is wrong because they insist that their pronunciation. I don't know where I got that because pronunciation is actually wrong. I don't know why.
What if we just started saying it that way just to get more views as people correct how we pronunciate things?
Let's just do every 80th word slightly wrong. I think that's how we pump up the views for this podcast.
I've heard that actually can work, but I don't think that's going to be our plan. But speaking of doing things wrong, let us move on to a correction we have here from Rag Kusakis, who says, this is more of a personal opinion than a correction, but on Broken Silicon 289, Tom and David said that Linux is still not easy to use. Anytime we say that, we're going to get one of these comments. Linux-based systems can come in lots of flavors, and some of them can be extremely hard. Yes, that's true. But also other distros like SteamOS can be pretty straightforward to use. Dare I say even easier, which I think you both agree. So technically, though, isn't that mean that Linux is easy because you just have to pick the correct distro? Also, I would like to add that companies like Epic resisting Proton anti-cheat support might be because they don't want to accept that their stores are shit. And if they use the Epic store on the Steam Deck, it might trigger direct comparisons, and most people would simply buy it on Steam so they can check out in under an hour. P.S. I only now manage to catch up with everything, so sorry if some of these references are outdated. Yes, but I will say this. My whole opinion on the Linux and gaming, I'm just going to divert to the last Broken Silicon 291 with Matt from Alderaan Games. Is a developer that had a lot to say about Linux, is they put all of their games on Linux, and they are working on Steam Deck support. And yes, Steam Deck's easy to use for the things that you want to use it for, if that means everything through Steam. But he said it was hard, I believe, to compile it using multiple SSDs. It's and I said, well, about an SD card. Yes, it can do an SD card, but that's all the Steam Deck is meant to do. And that he kind of hinted that from what he's hearing behind the scenes, this, and we'll get to this as one of the stories, like SteamOS expanding to more products. It's not just as simple as put SteamOS on a laptop, because it had trouble recognizing multiple SSDs. An SD slot doesn't count. It's already built to do that. So there's all of these things they have to program into it to work inherently that aren't in SteamOS. So that is my counterpoint to you, Rag Kusakis. But thank you for writing in. Now let us move on with the first story, which requires this green lighting. Story number 1. Yep. We're starting with the thing everyone will not stop talking about. RTX 5000 series announced, quoting first from NVIDIA. Powered by the NVIDIA Blackwell architecture, 5th generation Tensor cores and 4th generation RT cores, the GeForce RTX 50 series delivers breakthroughs in AI-driven, underline that, AI-driven rendering, including neural shaders, digital human technologies, what's that mean? Geometry and lighting. Blackwell, the engine of AI, has arrived for PC gamers, developers, and creatives, said Jensen Huang, founder and CEO of NVIDIA. Using AI-driven neural rendering and ray tracing, Blackwell is the most significant computer graphics innovation since we introduced programmable shading in 25 years. It isn't, Jensen. You said the same thing about Ampere. You said the same thing about Lovelace, and they were both impressive, but I don't think every time it's the most impressive. Or like, what does that mean for Turing? That was when I actually added ray tracing. Anyways, though, here's the lineup, everybody. Starting in January, I believe there's rumors out there that these will launch January 3rd, 30th, if not completely confirmed by now. The 5090, $2,000, 2176 CUDA cores. So that's 32% more CUDA cores than the 4090. And then 32 gigabytes of GDDR7, which gives you 1,792 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. It's 70%, and it's over a 512-bit bus. So that's 70% more bandwidth than the 4090. And then there's the 5080, $1,000, 10752 CUDA cores, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 30% more bandwidth than the 4080 Super. I believe it's single digits less bandwidth to 10% less bandwidth than the 4090. 5070 Ti, 749, 8,965, or that might be a typo there, but 60-something CUDA cores, 16 gigabytes of RAM, again, with almost a terabyte of bandwidth, and then the 5070 at a surprising 549 MSRP with 6,144 CUDA cores and 30% more bandwidth than the 4070. So, as expected, NVIDIA has launched their RTX 5000 GPU lineup at CES keynote. This launch was quick and brief, though, before Jensen Huang swiftly moved on to AI. As a result, honestly, we haven't gotten as much information as usual, which continues a trend that we've been seeing with Ampere and then Lovelace, where every generation they talk less about the graphics when they announce them and more about AI. There is a massive, never-before-seen gap as well between the 5080 and the 5090. I believe that is with less than half the CUDA cores between them. The widening of this gap has also been a trend. While the 5090 should bring reasonable improvements, but just from its raw size, the 5080 is only 5% bigger in shaders than the original 4080. The whole lineup has 10 to 50% higher boost clocks, implying a modest improvement from prior generations in pure raster. The one area of significant improvement is memory bandwidth, not size, because NVIDIA is still limiting their top-end GPU. Let's be honest. This is Carbon Cry's editorialization, 16 gigabytes. The 5090 is an AI workstation card at this price. It's going to be $2,000, but it is GDDR7 nonetheless that they're using for it. So as for performance itself, we cannot say much right now. NVIDIA claims, for example, that the 5070 is as strong as a 4090, but that is when using DLSS 4, which is DLSS 3 on steroids, inserting 3 generated frames between actual rendered ones, most frames generated. NVIDIA used this throughout their presentation, making it impossible to make direct comparisons. So yep, our worst fears about marketing's use of fake frames has been realized. All right, Dan, what did you think of all of the Blackwell announcements?
I mean, I continue to get more skeptical as time goes on of their unveilings, where it's like, so the 5080 has what, 10% more cores than a 4090? So I wouldn't be surprised.
Which one?
I was thinking of the 4080.
Like 10% more than the 4080. That's what I thought you meant, but
yeah, I misspoke. Depending on architectural improvements, we might not see that big of an improvement in performance versus the 4080. Like, I don't know. It really remains to be seen how much of an price performance improvement we'll see, because actually think you might see very similar, like maybe a 10% price performance improvement when compared to like all the cards that were out after the S series or the Super series.
The Super series.
Because like the 5070, wouldn't surprise me if that's not that much stronger than the 4070 Super. And if that's it,
I've been directly told, this was something I leaked a while ago, that it's that behind the scenes NVIDIA was telling reps it's a 4070 Ti, which you consider that it has like 5% more CUDA cores, 30% more bandwidth. Average that out. Yeah, that sounds about like a 4070 Ti.
Yeah, so you really might not see that huge of an improvement in price performance. I mean, crossing my fingers, I hope I'm wrong on this, but them leaning so hard into that AI caveat has me really skeptical about the performance we're going to get out of this series outside of like the 5090. And I don't know, I think NVIDIA might be doing like a very brief marketing win that's going to crash and burn really quickly, because this is obviously a lie, the performance metrics they were touting. Unless you took note of the fact that he said because of AI after every performance claim.
It's like, because of AI, we can make this. Because of AI, we can do this. And that's how he can say, well, I didn't lie.
Yeah, which my takeaway from this was, like, Lovelace got a ton of flack a couple years ago because people saw those like 2 to 4x improvement in performance over last generation, and everyone was immediately called them out for this being BS. And then I think the lesson they learned from that is, well, what if instead of showing the graph, we just make the claim without showing a graph?
Yeah.
And the graph was the problem. It wasn't the claim.
Jensen Wang, 8 gigabytes is enough, says, so initially people are actually buying the 5070 is equal to the 4090, it seems. Is this a win or a loss if it holds true up until review? So I assume you mean if it holds true that people keep buying this.
I think people saw through it relatively quickly. Or I watched the stream the next day, and I immediately like went online and like looked, well, what are people saying? There was a lot of skepticism about that, because the number of times he said, empowered by AI, or because of AI, we can get this performance. So I think people noticed that pretty quickly. I mean, I noticed it while watching it. So, and I hope most people did. I guess you never know, though.
So I saw this in real time because I was watching it live in the Moore's Law said Discord, and also saw live chats on YouTube. Compared to last time, I believe, well, yeah, let me think, how do I put this? Because also there were those fake rumors, remember, with Lovelace, where you had these bullshit Twitter leakers where they said that Lovelace was going to be 4 times faster than Ampere. And because of that, I think there were some people that saw that and went, oh, well, maybe 2 to 4x is real. But I don't know. I just swear in the Moore's Law at Discord and in the live chat a couple of years ago, overwhelming majority of people saw 2 to 4x and went, this is nonsense. And this time around, I saw way more comments. No offense to our fans saying AMD's cooked. By the way, people cannot stop saying the word cooked. I don't know what's going on anymore.
Well, Tom, that's just because slang now evolves on a monthly basis rather than
this is
yearly.
January's the year of the feels like year, the month of saying cooked. Certainly. But anyways, like, and by the end of the presentation, everyone was skeptical. But compared to 2 years ago, my point is, I think more people bought into it quickly. So my interpretation of that is, I feel like more of the mainstream press will buy along with it than before, or play along with it compared to before. And
yeah, we'll see.
But I do agree, once the dust settled, people were skeptical.
Yeah, because while watching it, I saw 5070 touting 4090 performance numbers, and I was like,
that was immediately the biggest red flag I've seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, and then by the second or third time he said, because of AI, I was like, oh, I know exactly what you're doing. That, and I can't remember the order of the presentation, to be fair. I think I might have seen the video you sent me showing the like 27 frames per second versus like 200 frames per second with DLSS.
There's this DLSS video where at first, what did I assume it was? I assumed it was like the 4090 with no frame gen, the 5090 with max frame gen, and the difference was like 26 to 240 frames per second. No, it was just 5090 alone. I'm like, wait, what? It's only doing 26 native frames. This is gonna be sluggish as hell.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I'd already seen that video by the time I watched the conference. So maybe there was some skepticism pre-baked into what I
you had both skepticism and skepticism.
Yes. So maybe there was already that pre-baked into there, and I caught on immediately. But yeah, 5070 as a 4090 replacement, quite the claim. And if NVIDIA could actually demonstrate that, I think AMD would be completely screwed this generation. But I'm waiting to be pleasantly surprised on review day, but I am not expecting it.
So I in the video, the CES analysis video that I put out, that did very well, over 100,000 views. So if you've missed it, it's a popular one. People check it out.
And you had a bit of a fake out in your title.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that's what everyone was. I'm like, how do I title this? And I'm like, screw it. Is AMD cooked? Because the answer is no. I don't think they are. Because I didn't spend too much time on it, and my point in that video was because I don't need. It's a waste of my time. Like, we don't really know. We don't know the performance of this nonsense until third-party reviews, even more so than ever before. Like you said, it's like they did the same insane claims, but this time they didn't even give us normal graphs. But the few they gave us of showing like Far Cry 6, again, not the newest game with ray tracing turned on, but not a heavily ray traced game. From what I saw, it seemed like the 5090 was only like 30 to 40% faster than the 4090. And remember, this is a game they chose. The one game they chose to show that wasn't like full path tracing Cyberpunk was the game that looked only to be 30 to 40% better. And I believe, off the top of my head, the 5080, yeah, I mean, it looked like 20, 30% better. 5070 Ti, 20% better. 5070, 25, 30% better, which again, what's 30% faster than a 4070? 4070 Ti. So that is what I would tell people to expect. Expect the 5070 to be a 4070 Ti, 12 gigabyte, exactly, basically. Maybe a little better and fully path traced. Kind of seems like there might be something there where heavy ray tracing usage makes Blackwell pull ahead more, but it has to be heavy, which would make sense to me the way NVIDIA has been upgrading their architectures. But I mean,
you can have twice as many AI hallucinations as the 4070 Ti this time around.
But I guess that's what I would tentatively expect tell people to expect. 20 to 30% more performance, except the 5090, where I would still, we'll see. I mean, if it's 35% faster than the 4090, despite having 70% more bandwidth and 32% more compute, wow, that bandwidth is being used for nothing. I mean, good Lord. I would expect it to average to be at least 40% faster. And I've always been expecting 40 to 60% uplift here. We'll see, though.
Yeah, but at this point, after seeing the presentation, I don't even think this is really that useful of a number to give, but I guess that's where I'm at. It's like, I don't know, the 5090 will be 20 to 60% stronger than the 4090. Like, that's kind of where I'm at, because if you're showing performance 30% higher and that's like your big claim, okay, I don't know why I should believe that this isn't an exemplary performance increase. So maybe it's 20, but my initial
if it's 20, that's nuts, because it uses probably 30% more power.
And my thought initially, before even seeing this, would have been like 40 to 60% more. So I don't know. I feel like I'm more doubtful of NVIDIA after this, but we'll see if I'm wrong.
Let me see here. Dead AI writes in, how do people feel now that DLSS 4 plus 4 times frame gen means 94% of their pixels are AI slop?
And that's a good way to put it. I do think, to be fair, though, at least DLSS does seem to offer a benefit. Or I should
like
say,
the upscaling nature,
the upscaling itself,
a
side of it does provide a benefit that does improve latency, even if maybe it's not quite as good as native resolution. But yeah, having 3 AI frames per every actual rendered frame, I'm very skeptical of that.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. I mean, if if DLSS 4 is black magic, like Jensen's talking about freaking predicting which way you're gonna look before you know or something. I'm like, okay, I mean, if you can do that, if you've solved the free will problem with quantum computing that Devs explores, the TV show, that's practically what he was talking about here. And if you can compress textures for your anemic 12 gigabyte card so that it can have 8 times the capacity of 12 gigabytes. Although, again, I think that was compared to not compressed, what they showed, whatever the number was. They already use Oodle to compress things dozens of times, I'm told. Like, so, or 8 times or something. Like, okay, but I have a feeling it's not going to work that well. And again, speaking with the last guest of Broken Silicon, Matt of Alderaan Games, he does not believe half of this stuff will just work. You're going to have to program it into the game yourself. So at launch, few games will support this, and the devs will have to do this themselves. And a lot of developers, from what I'm hearing, are worried that what's going to happen is they're going to spend 5 years making a game, perfectly deciding on the art direction and how things look to the player. And then NVIDIA is going to feed it through a crap blender that's just going to blur everything, but pretend to have more frames. I mean, I don't know. If it's black magic, sure, AMD's cooked. If it's not, I think it's going to be really interesting. It'll be very good for the channel. How many opinion videos we're going to be able to do over the next few months?
Well, I think this is in one of the reader mails, so maybe you'll jump to it after I give you the idea. But I could see there being a future in a few years where NVIDIA is NVIDIA in a lot of ways is they're making strides in technology every time they release something, which is good. They're not in the same place like Intel has been in, but they seem to be overinflating all of their performance claims, and there's going to be a point where it kind of looks like they're worried about stagnation. And I'm worried in 1 or 2 generations from now, like we're just hiding software solutions or pretending software upgrades are hardware upgrades, or quote unquote upgrades in software are being used to mask like a slow stagnation in their hardware development. Mm-hmm. Where like, yeah, every 2 years they want to claim that they're doubling or quadrupling performance, when in reality they're making price performance at any given price point like 20% better, maybe.
Yeah. I actually talked about this. I don't know if it was in a video, but in Moore's Law, at least in the Discord, Moore's Law said, you should get access to if you support us on Patreon. I brought up that, like, it just seems like they're going to aim for a 20% improvement, whatever it is, 20 to 30, and they're going to find a way to get there, and they're going to stop at that because they already hold whatever it is, 80% of the market.
Because yeah, like next generation, I don't know if they're going to be able to do more frame gen. Like if the 6090, I don't think they're going to be able to come out on stage and say 7x or 8x frame generation and not be met with, okay, man, sure.
Yeah. Let me see here. Grand Demand writes, and it says, do you think that Blackwell will incorporate a version of the FDE, the file decompression engine that is supposedly found on T239? That's supposedly the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm thinking it could help mitigate the direct storage overhead and possibly assist in neural texture compression if that ends up being introduced in any real way. I guess that reminds me to remember RTX-IO, which now is in some games. It's not in every game. That took like years to come out. They announced it with frickin' Ampere.
Yeah.
So it's like when you see file decompression, like compressing textures, like how long until that's in games? AI face, whatever that is. So we can make every picture look like a creepy AI picture.
Yeah, I didn't notice
every face look like a creepy AI picture.
I didn't notice in their press conference that when they showed the like neural face generation or whatever they called it. I was like, well, it still has that same weird AI face look that I've seen in every AI generated image of a person.
But no, I don't think so. To answer Grand Demand's question, I think that I could be wrong, but if they were going to put in a dedicated compression thing similar to the PS5 or whatever's in the Switch 2, why wouldn't they have done that with Lovelace? I mean, I think their goal is more tensor cores that can be used for many things, more CUDA cores that can be used for many things. And if you ask us why we don't have an RTX-IO IP block, we're going to tell you, why do you think the 5090 has 22,000 CUDA cores? That's why. Just freaking figure it out and brute force it. And now a quick word from our channel partner, Mint Mobile.
Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile. Enticing, right?
That is enticing, Ryan. Well, please make sure you clean that up in the yard. What a funny neighbor to have out there. Great guy. Yeah. Say hi to Blake for me. I got to do the ad, though, for you. So, anyways, this piece of content is brought to you by Mint Mobile. It's honestly been a very long time since I've looked around at phone plans, but I kind of had to in preparation for this ad. And when I did, I have to admit that some of Mint Mobile's competitors, and I'm not supposed to mention them, but some of them, they just don't want you to see what you're paying for. But not Mint Mobile. They tell you what things cost, what you get, and what limitations there are in a very upfront manner. And that's probably because they know they have nothing to hide, and that's really their greatest selling point. You can get a family plan and a family plan, switch to or from a solo plan, and upgrade it mid-month as you need on whatever phone you already own. And yeah, that's the benefit of Mint Mobile. It's great pricing and flexibility to do whatever you want. And you know what? If you click that link in the description and sign up, it actually does help me quite a lot. It helps this channel a ton since I'm partnering with them. And actually, for a limited amount of time, you will get 50% off Mint Mobile's 12-month unlimited plan if you sign up before the current promotion expires. So you're not only helping the channel, you're also helping yourself if you go to the link in the description. Support Moore's Law is Dead by signing up for Mint Mobile today. Aiden writes in, it says, so what is the street price of the 5090 going to be? I don't know supply. Or like I don't know that yet. I actually haven't asked. I probably should start asking that about now. My guess is the 5090 is going to sell like hotcakes. I'm sorry, it's how many teraflops? It's got 32 gigabytes of RAM. It's got. I saw this too today that the 4090 had 2 8th generation encoders, and NVENC encoders, and then 1 DNV DEC encoder. So they disabled, I read online today, I hope I'm not wrong about this, that one of the encoders that they just left on for the RTX 6000 series, like for professionals, it's completely enabled now with the 5090, and it's a generation better. So if you're using this for professional work, which I've told people if I could sell my 4090 and pay a couple $100 to get the 5090, this thing might be twice as fast at like doing some professional tasks. This is going to sell like crazy for that. I'm sorry, I think it will.
Yeah,
that alone, before we talk about the fact that it's the top gaming card, and we already learned that millions of rich gamers will buy the 4090 for $2,000.
Yeah, if it's a matter of like it's way better for encoding and decoding
and everything.
Yeah,
I mean, it has more RAM.
I could imagine that selling like hotcakes for people that actually use this for a job.
I could see it approach $3,000 pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's all a matter of like, well, what percent of people that are in the market for this are content creators or like researchers? Because I could also imagine. I could imagine like researchers and stuff wanting to buy this for the AI performance. So if that's a sizable portion of the market for it, then $3,000, yeah, sure.
Oh, that's the thing is it's like, but how much of that market was saturated by the 4091 and they don't need more? And 2, the 4090, I was told is the biggest launch of a GPU, an expensive GPU in history. I mean, and remember, expensive GPUs used to be $700, $1,000, and this thing, like NVIDIA supplied hundreds of thousands. I mean, not millions of 4090s at launch. For a card that expensive to still sell out right away was crazy. So I don't know though. Did they budget the exact amount of 4090s that people that wanted it needed, or not? What I'm saying is, if they double the supply of the 5090, what if they do? Does that mean that the market's, there's only so many rich people? Like, that's what I don't know, is the supply and demand aspect of it. But I'm sure there will be higher demand than the 4090, or at least similar.
Yeah, I mean, if they're expecting a huge increase in demand,
but again, though, it's like, but we still don't know how many people don't need more. If you're a gamer, probably a lot of people. If you're a professional, you probably all want the 5090.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, that's the big thing is, well, are 15% of people that own a 4090, are they using it for content creation or some other productivity task? If so, then yeah, I could see it being a huge thing in the market. But if it's only like a pretty small percentage, I don't know.
This is anecdotal, but at least one person I spoke to that works at a Micro Center said that when they asked, that this person for fun would ask people when they checked out with a 4090, like, what are you using it for? I think the person said it was a third to half of them.
That's I guess there are a lot of people that are making content these days. Like,
well, again, or AI. They say AI, non-gaming. So most of it was AI.
Okay, I mean, so that's more than I would have bet. So yeah,
you need those cat pictures with messed up claws. Quick Jumper writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. Your latest podcast made me think about a concerning parallel between NVIDIA and Intel. Just as Intel resorted to bolting on E-cores to compensate for their struggling monolithic architecture and power efficiency, it was really the size of the core, not really that it was monolithic. NVIDIA seems to be using software tricks like DLSS and frame generation to mask their own architectural challenges. So that's not true. I think this is something that I actually used to argue a lot in the early days of the channel. When Turing came out, people, who bought Jensen's marketing hook, line, and sinker would say things like, well, they added tensor cores so that we could have ray tracing in games. And I went, no, they didn't. They added tensor cores to sell to professionals in Hollywood who need ray tracing, real-time ray tracing. And then they were like, well, shit, 20-30% of our die is tensor cores and ray tracing. What are we going to do? And they found a way to make it do something for gamers. It's the same thing with the optical flow accelerator in Lovelace. What are we going to do with that? Well, it can accelerate frames faster than something that doesn't have it. So let's focus on that. Everything you're seeing right now, it seems like Blackwell is like Lovelace, and then they're just like 20% bigger, all this other crap. Like, and they're just finding a way to use that crap. So it's the opposite of what you said. They're not covering up. Lovelace is a great architecture. Were you to remove the RT cores, the tensor cores, and shrink that thing down to a smaller die size, I bet it would be the smallest, most efficient non-ray tracing architecture on the market. That's not what they're doing because they want to sell this for other reasons. So this is very different than Intel. Their architecture's not struggling. They're just struggling to find something to do with the non-gaming stuff for gamers. But so far, they have the resources to do it. That's at least what I'd argue. Because instead of solving fundamental issues like power consumption, but Lovelace is efficient. I don't think that's the issue. He said, do you think NVIDIA is following a similar pattern? And no, and the notes I even took was, I would say it would be like if Intel added E-cores to i7s in like 2012 when they were dominant, and it was because they wanted to sell their i7s to server people in addition to gamers, and they just had the luxury of adding this stuff gamers didn't need, which is what NVIDIA is doing and finding a way to make it be used by games. So I don't think that's really a good comparison at all, personally, Quick Jumper. I think NVIDIA is finding stuff to do with non-gaming stuff for gamers because they have all this wasted die space if they don't do that. And so far, they're largely successful. They have 80% of the market, whether you like the way they're doing it or not. And when you see AMD moving to UDNA, they're probably going to do the same stuff.
I guess it just depends on how long this AI market increases for, because as long as that's the dominant force in the market, which I think it kind of just has to be acknowledged that for graphics, it is the dominant force in the market now. There's not going to be that big of an incentive to bifurcate your architectures to make a gaming specific architecture and an AI specific architecture. Whereas if we see a huge crash in AI in 2025 or 2026, maybe there will be an incentive to do that again.
All right. Let us now move on then to story number 2. Moore's Law is dead leaks NVIDIA APU family in RTX 5060 pictures. At CES, NVIDIA confirmed both the Moore's Law is dead 5090 24 gigabyte leak and the 5080 16 gigabyte laptop leaks. And now it is time to follow those up with the first leak photo of GB206. This is the die which is likely to be used in the RTX 5060. From the board photo this channel received, we can confirm that the 5060 has 4 memory chips on a 128-bit bus, meaning the 5060 in many forms will be an 8 gigabyte card. Although, again, I expect them to have 12 gigabyte versions of that because they know it will have to, and they'll need GDDR7 to do that. Furthermore, I have been told that the die itself is 183 millimeters squared, and this is consistent with comparisons to the memory chips. This is close to the size of 80106 used for the 4060 Ti, but anyways, why are we assuming that NVIDIA is going to use the O6 die for the 5060 when they use the O7 die for the 4060 in the previous generation? Well, the other Blackwell GPUs use higher tier dies or more established chips. Like, for example, the 4070 Ti used 104. This time, the 5070 Ti is going to use the O3 die to have more RAM, and the non-Ti seems to be using a slightly cut down, I guess you would say O5, which is kind of their O4 die this time, whereas the 4070 was like crazy cut down from the full O4 die. Furthermore, GB207, as far as we're aware, can only use GDDR6, eliminating any possibility for a 12 gigabyte version down the track. Also, I believe it might only have 2,500 CUDA cores, which is just, I don't think, enough for this. So, yeah, that is, we've pictures out. This is what the die looks like that will probably be used for the 5068 gigabyte, presumably the 5060 12 and 8 gigabyte models for desktop. And additionally, also in this video that this came from, we received information from Project Digits. Now, you may have missed this. This was near the end of the presentation. It was an AI workstation, like a mini PC with a really powerful graphics card, 20 CPU cores, and then other little dies attached to it. I leaked on Friday that there should also be laptop variants of the APU shown in Project Digits. Now, this is important because what NVIDIA showed off was a 20-core CPU die attached to a one AI petaflop, which is the amount the 5070 has. So attached to a GPU die that seems about as strong as an RTX 5070, and combined, like, you know, kind of how they did with the big GB200 server, like super AI system. But I am told that's not it. Yes, there's the 20-core one, the 5070 GPU that can be put together. I'm told there's also a die for a laptop variant, both for CPU and GPU, and they can mix and match them as they want based on yield. So there should be both this big 5070 20-core Strix Halo killer die, but there should also be a smaller one that is probably like the 4070 per laptop, 4070 performance API leaked, and then even a smaller handheld one. So this is a really big deal, because this means NVIDIA has their own Strix Halo killer, number one. And number two, they also have probably plans to compete across the entire laptop stack with APUs. Also, I can confirm that the 20 cores in Project Digits is 10P and 10E cores. And so let me see if there's anything else here. But yeah, so this could be a game changer for the laptop market in terms of competition. So what did you think about all of this?
I mean, 20 cores is, I think, more than I had assumed it would have.
To be fair, it is ARM.
They could be worse cores.
Right. So it's like 10 big, 10 little. Strix Halo is 16 big cores with 32 threads total.
Yeah.
So I think this would make sense, and might still be weaker than Strix Halo CPU.
Probably weaker than Strix Halo, but that if that's paired with something that's about the power of a 5070 or 5070 laptop, this could be a
desktop.
Yeah. Yeah, if this could be that 5070 desktop with a somewhat weaker CPU, that could be the new killer gaming chip. So, hey, release that if if there aren't a ton of compatibility issues on laptop NVIDIA.
Yeah. Jensen Huang, 5070 is stronger than the 4090 in SLI. This guy just keeps changing his name. And you can tell when this person submitted the questions because their name now involves the 5070, whereas before it was 8 gigabytes is enough.
He's doing fake propaganda for Jensen Huang.
Sidebar, my favorite joke this person who's a supporter of Moore's Law Z keeps making in the Discord is anytime people complain about the 4070, about the price of the 80 cards being over $1,000, he says, we tried to give you a $900 4080 and you rejected it. 4080. Anyways, he says, given NVIDIA's in-house ARM CPU plus Hopper GPUs are having problems getting working, being rented online for under older NVIDIA GPUs. Oh, I see what he's saying. Can NVIDIA really get Windows on ARM to work? So people, when they rent server power through the cloud, they tend to not want their Grace CPU. They want Intel or AMD CPUs attached to it. Profits from AI are not yet a bubble, are far. Anyways, I think he made another joke. But I think that's an interesting question. And my answer is non-NVIDIA people, like developers, are optimistic that maybe NVIDIA can pull this off with an ARM APU on Windows. Like again, Matt from Alderon Games. So the most of his problems using the Snapdragon X Elite were due to Qualcomm's garbage GPU drivers, and just drivers in general for the CPU as well. Were you to have someone good at drivers, this actually might not be a big problem. That's pretty consistently what I hear from people is they think NVIDIA might be able to pull this off. However, people inside NVIDIA, they don't know. That's the interesting thing. Outside of NVIDIA, the perception is NVIDIA can pull this off. Inside of NVIDIA, well, they wouldn't be doing this unless they thought they could, but they're working overtime to make sure the software is good. And let me remind you, I don't know if this was in the write-up, but I was told that NVIDIA was going to announce the, if you will, Project Digits laptop family at CES. And much like RDNA 4 information, it was cut at the last minute. So who knows? Did they cut it at the last minute because it's not ready and it won't be ready this year? Maybe. But that is worth pointing out that it does seem like they know this has to be perfect and it is taking a lot of work to get it there. And again, they know. They don't want this to launch and be an X Elite situation. They want this to launch and kill Strix Halo.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that sounds like it could just be outsized enthusiasm at NVIDIA's ability to execute on its designs. And who knows, maybe this won't come to this won't come to desktop or laptop for a while, or maybe next generation is what ends up coming to the laptop market. And this just isn't at a state where NVIDIA would be willing to release it.
Well, again,
because I think releasing an architecture that doesn't work well or has as many problems as Qualcomm
or drags down their name, right? I'm told they're going to brand these laptops as NVIDIA laptops. They're not going to like pass off the blame. They're going to be like, this is an NVIDIA laptop. You don't want that to like be perceived as like, well, remember, if you buy an NVIDIA CPU, it's shit. They want it to be held up in the same regard as their graphics cards.
Yeah, it would be such an unforced error on NVIDIA's part to release it at the part where they're at in the market right now, where Intel, I don't know, they kind of have to get out what they said they're going to get out, and NVIDIA doesn't need to overpromise on CPUs right now.
But again, as for the NVIDIA APU side of this story, Godspeed, man. I want more competition, and this would check AMD. They won't drag their feet anymore. We're launching big APUs. Like, this is going to bring real competition to Intel, AMD, and Apple, and I really want that. And I want it to pan out as well, because if they prove ARM on Windows can work, MediaTek, Samsung, who knows who else could be? Maybe Samsung comes in, uses RDNA graphics with their own CPU. AMD may have a problem with that, but like the amount of competition we could get would be amazing. So I'm really hoping for that. Dead Eyes 117 writes in and says, do you think 3 GB modules, if they were already in mass production, then NVIDIA would have used them for the 50 series cards they just announced? Is it possible that delays in those coming to market are why Blackwell still has disappointing VRAM capacity? Could we see a super refresh with 50% more VRAM at each tier? The second one, maybe, I guess. I kind of find it unlikely because RDNA 1 had to compete with the Super Series, but they priced Turing too high. They're not pricing Blackwell as high as we expected for most of the 5080 for sure. 5080 is definitely cheaper than expected. And so there's less of a need to do that later on. And again, like another super, I'm just thinking of here, like, do you think about it, like AMD with RDNA 3 didn't have the 7800 XT out until well into the generation. So that's when they did super, like right after that came out. And then with the 2000 series, again, RDNA 1 came out like a year or like half a year at least after, I believe, Turing did. So there was time for a refresh anyways. RDNA 4 is launching at the same time. So I don't know that there will be super refreshes. Could there be new TIs? Yes. Could I see a 24 gigabyte 5080 Ti come out with faster memory and higher clocks? Maybe. I could maybe see something like that. But to your actual question about would they have done this? I don't think so, no. I think a 50, 70, 18 gigabyte, which I know they're considering, I kind of think that seems silly now if they're going to be this aggressive with pricing with the other card. The only one that I could have seen is a 5080 24 gigabyte. Like maybe there would have been a $1,200, $1,400 24 gigabyte 5080 to satiate enthusiasts that want more than 16 gigabytes of RAM. But every other one, No, I don't think so. Like, why would you do a 24 gigabyte 70 Ti? No, I mean,
Yeah, I guess the only possibility is they do that and they charge $50 more across, or $100 more in that reality. But I guess at the bottom of their lineup, that would maybe make this 5070 slightly better than it is now. But
yeah, but I mean, like, because I could see a 5070 18 gigabyte, and I've been told they're considering that one. But again, it's like, I actually just wish it would be less than 500. Like, don't make your lineup wonky. Just make it $500. Like, that's what it should be. And even then, I still think 12 gigabytes really shouldn't be on anything above $400 at this point, in my opinion.
Well, NVIDIA disagrees with you, Tom.
I know, but that's the funny thing is you see people go, can you believe the 5070 is $550? And I go, I mean, with 12 gigabytes, yeah, I can, because this might be worse than the 3070. This really might age worse than the 3070.
We'll see. Everybody said early on, or the 3070 wouldn't be a big issue, and it was a minor issue immediately, I would say.
Yeah, immediately there were games that struggled, and we've been talking about 12 gigabyte cards struggling with ultra settings for a couple of years now. So okay, we'll see. And that's the problem, is it's like, well, the 5070 was like, it should just be called the 5060, honestly, and 5060 Ti, if you will, be 450 or something. But I think anyone who gets that, watch out, because you're gonna struggle running some stuff very soon. I mean, game's already out. You're gonna struggle to run on ultra, even in 1440p, sometimes 12 gigabytes. All right, now let us move on to something with more than 12 gigabytes. AMD announces the RX 9000 series with story number 4, and I guess leaves this channel to leak the performance for them. Quoting first from Tom's Hardware, and then we'll actually get to a leak here. AMD's RDNA 4 GPUs have seen a few leaks and rumors, over the past year. And now AMD has pulled back the curtain a little bit to reveal its next generation Radeon RX 9000 series GPUs. As expected, AMD will be focusing on the performance mainstream market, eschewing the extreme end of the performance and pricing ladder, and perhaps skipping the budget segment as well. And we'll see about that. Release date, specifications, and pricing are still under wraps, but at least 2 of the model names are now official, with 2 more now effectively confirmed, right? Because they had a chart that said 9070 series, and they have 9060 series, so we know what that's going to be called. Now, this is where it gets weirder here. Citing lack of time, AMD did not present the RX 9000 series at their keynote. They did let Xbox talk about RDNA 4 for a while. Apparently, that's more important than their GPU. Anyways, this is the dumbest excuse I've ever heard. They did preview their GPUs in a press briefing, though. And as we have known for a long time, RDNA 4 will focus on competing in the mid-range, maybe high-end. And they also chose to yet again change their naming scheme to fit the role of their GPUs. The scheming can be summed up as changing what would have been 8700 to 9070. And AMD explains this as synchronizing with Ryzen, which is at 9000 series, and adopting NVIDIA's use of the third digit to denote the tier of card to make it easy for consumers. Okay, AMD. AMD announced the 9070 XT and the 9070 will launch in Q1, and in the naming site also confirmed the 9060 series. So moving on here. AMD also alluded to higher AI performance of their new GPUs, possibly meaning that they will have real AI accelerators like NVIDIA's GPUs or AMD's own CDNA cards. To go with this, they also announced FSR 4, which is confirmed to be machine learning based and only available, at least in its full form, we think right now, with RDNA 4 GPUs. Although every now and then in an interview lately, AMD is just like, oh, actually, it might work on 3, but we're not sure. AMD,
AMD, just be more confident in your press releases, because sometimes it feels like you guys are just like, we have it too.
What do you want us to say? What should we say? I know. AMD also had an FSR 3.1 versus FSR comparison, showing one scene from Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Hardware Unboxed Tim saw this comparison in person. There's a video out there. There's a link to it in the description. And he said this in an optimistic way. In general, when we've been looking at FSR 4 for this demo, I've been pretty impressed with the image quality that we've seen here, at least when comparing this one demo 4K performance mode versus 4K performance mode. It's a significant change. I think I'd be much happier to play games in this particular configuration. Let me just say I watched that video too from Tim at Hardware Unboxed, and you could immediately see the difference off screen, actually, in quality. It was just in performance mode, so it's like, who knows how good the peak performance is. At the same time, I would actually defend AMD and go, yeah, they had to show performance mode, so it was easy to notice over YouTube. Like they had to.
True.
But it does seem to be closer to DLSS than people might expect. All right, and now I actually want to move on before I throw it to you, Dan. So, like I said in the title, apparently all leaked the performance. I can't speak to FSR4, but I will say that I have a full, Dan, you've seen this, a full internal report on RDNA 4 performance from AMD. It's a really interesting one, actually, because it shows dates and performance. So, like, a briefing in October, a briefing in November, a briefing in December, and the different performance levels. Like, clearly this seems like a progress report from the RDNA 4 driver team. I begrudgingly decided not to show the slides just to protect my sources on this one, because this is huge that they got me this. Also, though, because it just lines up with what I've already leaked. So I don't see a point in like recreating slides that line up with what I've said. Anyone who doesn't trust me would just say he made him up. And if you do, you know, you already know. If you already trust me, then you know if it shows what I've already said, it doesn't matter. But I thought it would be fun to tell you exactly what some of the slides say on average. And I've actually written them down here today. Now, remember, this is AMD's own testing. I counted, like, for ray tracing, it was like 5 games in their average. For raster, it was like 10 games. So this isn't a 50-game average or something from Hardware Box or Tech Power Up. So they could be plus minus 5, 10%. I don't know. And also, the most up-to-date data I saw, I believe, is about a month old now. So who knows, again, if you add more games to the average, if it's worse or if it's actually better. But at least as of December, AMD was reporting that the 9070 XT is 7% slower than the XTX in raster and matches the 4080 in raster while consuming 304 watts. Or at least that's the TDP rating. It also seems between the 4070 Ti and the 4070 Ti Super in ray tracing. And if you compare it to AMD, it absolutely crushes the 7900 XTX in ray tracing. I believe there was a Black Myth Wukong benchmark was like 60% faster or something crazy. But oddly enough, that was still a game where NVIDIA did better. So they still have a mountain to climb in some ways. But again, so like I said, that's entirely in line with what this channel leaked. Raster between the 7900 XT and 7900 XTX, which means 4080, because the 4080 is actually weaker than the XTX and raster, and ray tracing that might get up to a 4070 Ti Super. Yep, somewhere between 4070 Ti and that. Now, the 9070, this is also encouraging, which, yes, has 16 gigabytes of RAM. The 9070 was 5% weaker than the XT in raster, meaning that at least the stuff I've seen, the 9070 is the performance of what the pessimistic, leakers online have said. So it's close to an XT in raster at 220 watts, and it seems around a 4070 in ray tracing, which, by the way, I was looking at the chart before recording, absolutely crushes the 7800 XT in ray tracing, but it seems a tad below the 7900 XT in ray tracing, somewhere around there. So again, summarizing, XT, 9070 XT, a little slower than the XTX and raster, the 7900 XTX, but matches the 4080 at 304 watts, and in ray tracing gets close to a 4070 Ti Super, and the games AMD chose to benchmark. The 9070 actually is almost a 7900 XT in raster, and also close to it in ray tracing as well, just slightly weaker in both counts. So yeah, what did you think of RDNA 4, Dan? And what do you think about the performance that I just leaked again?
It's around we've been reporting for a while, so there's not that much to really comment on. I mean, I think I hope FSR4 is very good, and they price this accordingly, because good pricing, FSR4 is great, and FSR4 is great. This is a huge improvement over what we currently have, even if this is just a mid-range card. But if they try to price this at like $600, I think it could be seen as a dead on arrival, or I think it could be dead on arrival. But I don't think AMD can do that with the 5070 at $550. So hopefully they go for like 500 or even below 500.
Well, so I thought we would talk about this, like when it comes, and I just spoke of the source, not the sources that got me this, source in retail. Like this person was asking, like, how do you think we're going to sell RDNA 4? Like the 5070 just looks bad. And I like told him what I've seen. And the person goes, oh, well, never mind. That RDNA 4 sounds easy to sell. And like, don't you think, Dan, if FSR4 looks good, here's my opinion. If FSR4 looks good and they can match NVIDIA's fake frames, which despite what people expected, the FSR3 frame generation is pretty well regarded next to NVIDIA's. It's just the quality of the upscaling still doesn't match them. If FSR4 manages to meet or exceed NVIDIA's frame generation and quality, and if the upscaling is close, in that world, I think they can get away with 600 and 500. Because let's be honest here. Again, we'll see if I'm wrong, but at least the report I saw on AMD, the 9070 XT looks like a 5070 Ti competitor. Not a 5070 competitor. At $599, it is $150 less. Like, the 5070 Ti will cost 20% more, over 20% more, while offering similar performance. And then that's just $50 more than the 4070. I mean, Freudian slip. The 5070. And it could be 30% faster with more RAM. I don't see how that's not fair to charge $50 more. And especially because the 9070 also has 16 gigabytes at 500. It's $50 less than the 5070, while likely offering 10% more performance and more RAM. 10% less cost, more RAM, 10% higher performance. That's that magic 30% I've talked about here. I don't see why you can't just sandwich the 5070 if FSR4 is as good. If it's not, screw it. Yeah, $499 and $449 or $399. Sure, if you can swing that AMD.
Yeah, I suppose the frame generation I'm kind of meh on, because if AMD comes out and says, well, we'll generate even more frames than they said, then this is just going to be a pissing contest that I don't think really achieves much. But if FSR is at the point where it's almost up to snuff or up to snuff with DLSS.
It's not like FSR3 where when they announced RDNA 3, they're like, FSR3 will exist someday. If it's not like that, if it's actually a feature, it doesn't need to be as good. They're charging less, but it can't just be like some distant thing.
It needs to be coming out close to launch, or ideally, if they have something to show off on launch day with FSR4, that would be great. Because I think that's one of the big things that AMD has failed to execute on with FSR is it's just not as prolific as I was hoping it would be when it was initially introduced. And DLSS is more prolific than I thought it would be when it was first introduced. So there's also that big gap where AMD really needs to get FSR and more stuff. And FSR4, if this is their big selling point, needs to be in a lot of stuff, at least somewhat close to launch. It doesn't need to be immediately, but it needs to be, I don't know, hopefully within 4 months, because this thing where they announce a new version of FSR and nothing has it or it's not even out for like 8 months or something. AMD can't keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. Carrie No Sugata writes in, what do you think of FSR4 and DLSS4 so far? Do you use frame generation? No. When gaming, and how much value do you think it adds? Not non-zero, because some people I can get why they would like it, but for me, it's not something I consider right now. Should AMD? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried frame generation in a bunch of, I shouldn't say a bunch. I've tried it in several games, and in games like Deep Rock Galactic, frame generation was straight up unusable in my opinion. Like it made the experience of playing the game worse to me. I've tested it a little bit with games like Age of Empires 4, but like there's not that much I can really do with it because Age of Empires 4 is such an easy to run game. So I'm just kind of doing testing just to see what it's like, and I don't think it detracts from the experience. I would say, like, yeah, it makes Age of Empires 4 maybe slightly better, but that's a game that latency really doesn't matter all that much. And anything else I've tried it's kind of my experience I had with Deep Rock Galactic, which was the first game I ever tested it with, where it's like, I don't really like this very much.
Yeah. And the example I always bring up, and I think this is like a year ago, is I tested it with my 4090 in Hogwarts Legacy. And I was standing, I think it was in like the mining vault, like where like the roller coaster is. I'm just going to call it that. It's a roller coaster, right? But like, and here's my problem with frame generation is the way I always put it is I can always find a reason not to use it that I find preferable. Like, locked. It was locked at 4K 120 because that's my display. I'm like, okay, we're at 4K 120, or was the display I used back then? Now it's faster. And I can turn on frame generation and max out everything. And yeah, look, it's locked at 120. Ray tracing's cranked all the way up, and it's smooth. And it looked better than I expected. Less artifacts than I expected. Visually, it was fine. It did feel a little sluggish, though. And there were the occasional artifacts. But then here's the thing. I turn off frame generation. I don't remember what it hit. It was like 80, 90, 100 frames a second. And I'm like, okay, so instead of frame generation, I'm going to go from DLSS Ultra to DLSS balanced. Boom, I'm locked at 120 anyways. Slightly less sharp image, no artifacts anymore. Same frame rate.
Yeah.
Double the half the latency. And that is my point, is you can almost always find a time not to use it. Where I find frame generation is probably the best is, yes, in games like Age of Empires or Flight Simulator. Although again, in those games, that's only because you don't actually need the high frame rate. And then really, I think it's handhelds would make a big difference if you could lock it. And this is what I'm wondering if AMD will do this. If you could lock a handheld or an APU in a laptop at 40 hertz or 40 real frames, I should say, and then extrapolate that to 240 by 6xing them, because 40 times 6 is 240, you could take these Strix laptops that all seem to have 240 hertz displays now for some reason and say it's 40, frames per second, which is right where latency doesn't feel terrible in gaming. And then we're going to extrapolate to 240 frames to max out your laptop with an APU. That's the situation I think it makes sense in. Or like the Steam Deck using frame generation, I've heard is huge. For anything remotely enthusiast, it seems like a waste of time, because it's like, guys, if you have even a 5070, if you have even a 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, that's equal to almost a 3070. Like, you have performance. Usually there's some useless thing you can turn down that visually won't be a big deal, but will give you 30% more frames. And I would do that over frame generation.
Yeah, or like in your other example, or just go to a lower DLSS mode.
Yeah.
Like frame generation really doesn't feel very necessary in almost any instance, unless you're trying to run the most insane version of Cyberpunk or something that the 5090 still apparently can't run at higher than 30 frames per second.
They turn on the dumbest modes ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
This piece of content is brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com. Near the end of 2024, Dan built a new PC with a fresh install of Windows 11 on a blazing fast Gen 5 NVMe SSD. And of course, that code for Windows 11 came from CDKeyOffer.com. And we've been using CDKeyOffer.com at Moore's Law Z for a very long time. I use it for my office software on both my desktop and my laptop, and that's because they're reliable. They've always been there for us, and they offer reasonable prices for Microsoft products that are usually set, in my opinion, at monopolistic pricing. And they're actually having a big sales event for New Year's right now. So if you're looking to get the best pricing on Microsoft software or games or other products on their website as well, please show support for a company that's shown support for the Moore's Law is Dead team and community for years by using offer code BrokenSilicon to get 25% off all Microsoft software and DieShrink to get 3% off everything else. So support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out CDKeyOffer.com today. Let me see here. Deadeye117 writes in and says, if the new FSR 4 model is only accelerated on RDNA 4, I expect them to do something similar to what Intel has done with Xe super sampling. Essentially 2 versions of the software, and you have the accelerators they need, they can run at a higher quality one. But that leaves other vendor cards running an inferior version. So this makes me wonder, what is stopping AMD from writing a version of FSR that can run on NVIDIA's Tensor cores like DLSS does? Well, I answer that right now. Why the hell would you do that?
Yeah, that seems like it would just only serve to harm AMD.
Yeah, in fact, what I would suggest is FSR is open source. So this is a perfect marketing win for AMD. Anytime someone asks them, soon probably, why is FSR 4 the machine learning accelerated version not built to run on NVIDIA? All AMD has to say is, it's open source. NVIDIA can do it themselves. Mm-hmm. Just like, there's a few smartphones that I think program their, like are preparing to use some version of FSR 4 with whatever they do with their APU on a smartphone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but AMD's not going to do that for them. It's open source NVIDIA. You do it.
Yeah, that's just charity.
Yeah,
at that point.
But yeah, and I think what will be interesting is if there's a hybrid one, or hybrid, it's really not hybrid, a half. I guess it'd be hybrid FSR. So what I'm hoping happens, I think I said this at a live stream or something, is there's FSR 4, and then right now there's FSR 3.1. My hope is as they go to 4.1, they go to 3.2, 3.3, and there's little things they learn sometimes that they apply to everything else so that it's still one big package that they're still improving. Because I do, again, no, FSR 3.1 is not as good as DLSS 3.9 or soon 4. But I will tell you, it is better than DLSS 2.1 or 2. All developers tell me that. If you don't think that, you don't remember how shitty DLSS used to be. Like, and the fact that they achieved that without machine learning hardware is crazy. And I hope they don't give up that fork of FSR and they're always bringing little breadcrumbs. And the interesting thing would be, will there be a middle one where like RDNA 3 and 3.5 can do something where they get some of the quality of 4? And I think it would behoove them to do that if they can.
I mean, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like you said, it's impressive they did that without machine learning when the first versions that was just, I don't know, offloading some tasks onto the tensor cores. I mean, it just made the game look worse. Like, if you'll remember, especially
DLSS
like
1
DLSS
was bad.
DLSS 1 was bad. DLSS 2
was good.
Was getting
it was
there.
Like worth using sometimes. By the time you got to 2.2, you always want to use it pretty much. I think FSR is there. I mean, FSR 3.1 in most games is worth using unless you're in 1080p. And even then, if you're in 1080p and using it, it's probably because your system's so weak you have to. But
yeah.
All right, let me see here. Little Germany writes in, we'll speculate on AMD's next naming trend in episode X290. I think you accidentally called it. Oh, I haven't re-listened to it. I might have actually. Why don't they just do 90s, 70s? Well, there you go.
You heard it here first.
I expect a check within a week, AMD. Techno writes in, does AMD have any regrets making Navi 44 and Navi 48 use GDDR6 instead of GDDR7? More so on 44 than 48, I think, because they could give it 12 gigabytes. No, I don't think so. I think we'll see. Let's wait for the final specs and the final performance to be official, like after reviews. Like if the actual die size ends up even a little smaller than the 5080, or even if it's around the same die size as the 5080, but they manage to get within, let's say, and again, I'm not saying it will. All I've confirmed so far is it seems to be around a 4080 in performance. Like if they're even within 20% of the performance of the 5080, while having way cheaper boards and using RAM that's 2/3, half as fast, depending on which memory speed they use. I used to be 2/3 as fast. Like, I think that was a technological achievement. And if it ends up being like 350 millimeters squared, then you'll go, so what? The die size is like 10% smaller than a 5080. They used way cheaper memory, way cheaper boards, and yet almost the same performance. And that's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Now, if whatever AMD's numbers were didn't take into account all of the games they performed badly in, and then we see AMD launch something that is the same die size as the 5080 or bigger and underperforms the 5070, then I bet they wish they used GDDR7. But until we know that, but I guess let me add that caveat too. Like, another reason I decided not to show a slide for these leaks is it's like, I don't know when, like I've heard this week when you guys are listening to this, maybe AMD will make things official. Certainly by the week after that, I believe they will, all the specs and performance. And so just remember anything that I just leaked today, that's what AMD's internal benchmarks were saying as of a month ago. Take it as meaning that. Don't take that as meaning I know the exact final performance, because I do not know what AMD's, and let's be honest, what AMD's going to claim very soon.
Yeah.
But I still thought this was interesting to tell you guys, just because it's interesting to know what they were comparing a month ago. All right, now let us move on to story number 4. AMD Strix Halo and Kraken announced, quoting first from Tom's Hardware, then adding, of course, editorialization. The Ryzen AI 300 series, which will be Kraken Point, and the Ryzen 200, not an AI series, which is because it's a hot point refresh, models are new to AMD's APU portfolio and set to power affordable yet capable laptops. However, that is weird they're next to each other. That'll be interesting to see how they cross over, by the way.
I guess that's just what AMD does these days, it seems. Like, I guess there's maybe a more obvious delineation between the two than there was in the past. Like, you don't.
What if it's just them getting rid of supply?
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, AMD will never get away from the
Rebrandion
allegations.
But the Rebrandion's getting the market share, so.
Because you could just keep. Well, I guess if it's just is a true refresh, you can call it the Ryzen 200 and I guess.
Yeah. There's no AI in it, Dan, which means it sucks. However, there is also the massive Strix Halo APU, which carries a unique design philosophy featuring 2 CCD-esque chiplets alongside a massive I/O die that houses in up to 40 CU iGPU and also its NPU. And let me see here. The claims that they have right now against Lunar Lake: 260% higher 3D rendering, 140% better graphics, so over 2x. And then against the Mac M4 Mac Pro, 12 core, 40% better 3D rendering, although noticeably absent was the M4 Max, by the way. Although compared to the 4090, they got 2.2 times AI inferencing because of the massive, like over 100 gigabytes of RAM they were able to use.
Yeah.
There will also be the 16 core 40 CU flagship, a 12 core 32 CU model as well, and then an 8 core 32 CU model, which is interesting. That would be the gaming one, that for sure. Also, I believe they announced a 6 core 16 CU model, which is weird. I always heard that that was going to go down to 20 cores for the Strix Halo low power. Remember that I leaked?
Yeah.
That's less than half the compute units. I don't know what that's about. I wonder if anyone will ever.
If that's just a different, that would have to be a different tile at that point, I would think, right?
If it is, that's interesting. I don't think it is. But if it is,
okay.
Sources at AMD, if you're listening, what's going on there? Someone email me. And so there you go. Strix Halo is finally out with 3 SKUs, which we already leaked, and AI Max Plus branding, which we already made fun of. The one slight surprise from the announcement, perhaps then, is the memory bandwidth, where AMD chose a more conservative 8,000 megatransfer memory. Yeah, I think what was that? I think it was like 8533 is what I leaked 2 years ago, which is lower than we were told. Still, it can go up to 128 gigabytes of memory, 96 of which can be addressable by the GPU, and 256 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. It's a capable APU. AMD focused on 3D rendering and AI usage and development for the most part. So, as we were told, the initial target, that's right, that's also what this channel leaked, is the professional workstation laptop market rather than gaming. In both of those areas, and especially AI inferencing with large models, Strix Halo is bringing great performance and efficiency simply by combining a strong enough GPU with gobs of memory. A good surprise for us also is that AMD has also already presented a supposedly gaming-focused laptop, though, and also an HP mini PC workstation. And a Chinese PC company, GMK Tech, has already presented a Strix Halo mini PC. Also, Asus showed off a cool tablet with Strix Halo as well. So we expected these types of products to come a bit later. It's nice to see them coming sooner along with the AI and workstation-focused products. And again, that seems like decent adoption to me, people, from what I'm seeing here.
That 395 Max is too impressive to not get decent adoption, I would say.
Well, there's been some consternation in the Moore's Law in Discord, like, why hasn't HP showed off 20 laptops with it like they have Strix Point? And it's like, that's a new socket.
Well, I'm sorry, 16 core 40 CU APU that is designed to use a ton of RAM. That's a workstation product that's meant for doing AI workloads. This is a way more niche product than Strix Point is. And I understand,
well, it needs more specific design work too. You're not just throwing this into a laptop that used to have, let's be honest, I think Rembrandt could still fit Strix in it. And like, this is like, you got to design a whole new laptop. So if we only see like a few from a company, well, whatever, if there's an HP laptop, an HP workstation mini PC, why do they need to make more than just that? If Asus makes a tablet and a laptop good enough, we don't need 10 versions of it.
No, I don't get why you would. And I don't know, that I could see those laptops with that being very expensive and not meant for that many people. I guess we'll see what it ends up being priced at.
Yeah, I think sorry I cut you off. What you meant by niche too is like Strix Point. Yeah, it's in a million laptops because like sometimes it has a graphics card, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's a tablet. Strix Halo, it's really specifically for like 2 or 3 types of products, and that's it.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe we'll see some iteration of it going into a gaming PC, but this isn't a gaming PC first product. And honestly, I think the 8-core 32 CU model or version is a lot more reasonable for gamers. Like, sure, yeah. Balanced is a good way to put it. Like, okay, it has 20% fewer CUs, but if it has the same power envelope, what if it's just the iGPU is just clocked a lot faster than what you see in the 395 models.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and you're paying a premium for this advanced packaging and stuff. You want the ultimate price performance in gaming. I would say you use Kraken or even just the Hawkpoint Refresh 8 core, and you pair that with like a 5070 or something, or a 9070M. Like, that's, you don't need more than 8 cores, often more than 6 cores if it's the latest architecture. So this is really for a lot of things. You're paying for a premium device here.
Or if your AMD is advertising an enthusiast / premium /
Max,
whatever
Pro
/ Max, a bunch of almost synonyms for each other.
Yes, 10% from being a synonym, and you've got elite, premium, professional tiers, and then there's mainstream at the bottom. Well, what's entry? There is no entry. Hey, we only make premium products besides the mainstream.
There is no entry level in this market. Everything is at lowest quality mainstream, Tom.
AI Fish AI Wrangler writes in and says, I wonder if there isn't a little too much hopium around Strix Halo at this point. It's been my most anticipated product since you leaked it years ago, but recent developments have somewhat deflated my enthusiasm. It seems like Bizarro World that we're hoping NVIDIA prices something to bring the price of competing products down in APU as well, I think. But if AMD had intentions of a wide release of Halo for gaming laptops, why develop a whole range of RDNA 4 mobile cards? Because why not? Yeah. I mean, you just made them anyways. And I think the best price to performance gaming laptop you're going to get is probably like a 9060M with Hawkpoint. Like, that's the price performance. The more expensive and maybe even a little stronger model, well, you're getting this for the battery life if you get Strix Halo or AI work or something. Now, as for enthusiasm, I agree. I think this would have been much more earth-shattering were it to have come out a year ago. A year ago, NVIDIA wouldn't have APUs on the horizon. A year ago, they would have just flat out beat Apple, I think. A year ago, we would be comparing Strix Halo to 4070 laptops that it's beating. Now it's going to be compared to the 5060, and I think the 5060 might beat it. Now it's going to be compared to M4 Max, soon M5. That's going to beat it. Now, it's the one thing I will say is, from what I'm hearing from the Fox, efficiency may be way beyond what we expected. So it may really be the premium device at its tier. But a year ago, the tier would have been higher. And there's just no way around it.
Oh, yeah, that's not a surprise. Or even if it had came out at the same time as Strix Point or close to the same time as Strix Point, yeah, this would have just been a more impressive thing. But I still think it's an interesting product, and I think it's going to be one of the better products that come out this year. Even if it would have came out on time, it would have been, like you said, earth-shatteringly impressive.
Yeah, which, was supposed to come out like first half or middle of last year. Now it's coming out the beginning of this year. I still think it's going to be really great. Everyone I talked to behind the scenes is excited about it, but it is now facing much harder competition. And there's just, it is, but I still think it looks good. All right, let us move on to story number 5. Ryzen 9 9950X3D and 9900X3D announced in CES, quoted from Tom's Hardware yet again. Following in the footsteps of the world's fastest gaming processor, the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, AMD's new Ryzen 9 9900X3D and 9950X3D are optimized for games and creator workloads. Boasting a total of 16 cores, AMD touts its Ryzen 9 9950X3D as 20% faster in gaming and 10% faster in productivity than Intel's Core Ultra 9 285K. The Ryzen 9 9900X3D and 9950X3D share similar internals, by the way, with 2 CCDs, and one of them features that extra SRAM. Yep, unfortunately, these still combine a Vcache CCD with a normal non-Vcache chiplet, which AMD blames on cost. Given sales and demand for the 9800X3D, it makes sense for them to focus on that SKU. I guess that's true. They could make half as many 9800X3Ds, which would power an AMD motherboard, which they would make more money from selling more of if they were hamstrung by that. That might be, it's not price and it's supply. They're hamstrung probably by supply. That's why they decided to go with one CCD, I think. Anyways, at least AMD has not yet mentioned Xbox Game Bar anywhere. So hopefully the thread allocation mechanism is now fully integrated into firmware or into Windows. After all, if that mechanism were to have worked well enough and seamlessly enough, there wouldn't have been as much of a demand for us wanting a dual Vcache variant.
But we can still cross our fingers, Tom, and hope that AMD somehow messes up this launch. Although I'm less doubtful of that. The core parking thing hopefully won't be an issue this time around.
Well, half of the core parking stuff they fixed would apply to this. Like they had core parking issues at launch, and so if they fixed that, presumably they fixed it for this as well.
It would be impressive, in other words,
if they did not.
If they had core parking issues this time around.
Yes.
But other than that, I don't know. This is it's the same discussion we have around the previous generation of X3D, where I think the 9900 X3D is kind of stupid, and the 9900s are always the 12 cores are always the thing.
I still think that's useless.
CPUs that end up dumb, and the 9950 X3D. Yep, it'll be the best gaming CPU, or tied with the 9800 X3D, and it will be great for productivity tests. But it's a slightly less interesting, substantially less interesting product than if both CCDs had X3D. I think there would just be more to talk about on review day if it had two Vcache CCDs.
Do you know what the best use of the 7900 X3D was?
What?
If your 7800 X3D broke, they could send you that because no one wanted it. Seriously, I've heard so many stories of that. 7800 X3D breaks, they're sent a 7900 X3D to replace it because AMD can't get rid of them. So I don't know. Maybe if they fixed core parking, the 9900 X3D will make a little more sense. I just still don't get it though. Again, if the argument is you want more systems and not to be hamstrung by supply, why would you not then make like a 9600 X3D that you could presumably sell for like $350? I mean, I don't get it. I don't know.
I think the market, the market would be a lot more enthusiastic with just releasing a 9600 X3D right now. Although maybe that creates a mismatch in IO dies and disabled dies they need to use or something like that.
Well, I guess I will say this as well. I think this was like 6 months ago. Someone pointed out to me like why they do the dual CCD thing with the 12 core, even though it doesn't really make sense on paper. It's the second 6 core in the 9900X or X3D is the worst yields of it. So they're taking something that maybe like last gen couldn't have even been a 7600, and now they can add this piece of silicon to a 7600 and it becomes a 7900X they can sell for twice as much. So maybe they're taking the worst of the worst 6 core Vcache yields, and they're like, if we just throw a frickin' 9600 on top, we can charge twice as much. That would be the only reason. But then they announced pricing, I believe, for it. Yeah, but then they better not overcharge for it. There's no way around it. I think the 9900 X3D should cost $10 more than the set 9800 X3D. Like you're getting rid of the yields you don't want to use anyway. So pass that along and make this worth like $500 or something. If you do that, then I get the product. But AMD, it's going to be $500 no matter what you lie and say the MSRP can be $600. No one's buying that. I don't think that's going to drift towards that.
The 9800 X3 is going to end up being more valuable than or close to the same value at least.
Like, let me see, 7900. Come on, 7900 X3D. It is currently. They're just sold out because they stopped making it, so I can't do that fun comparison anymore. But it was fun every now and then. You'd find the 7900 X3D less than the 7800 X3D, to which I go, I guess, sure, get that if you need the threads. All right, well, let us now move on to story number 6. Intel Panther Lake shown off, 140 Ti GPU kind of impresses us. So quoting first from Dr. Frederick Chen on Twitter and then moving on to some other stuff. CES 2025 had 6 Panther Lake demo units. The functionality of the units is fairly low beyond Task Manager. They were running A0, so first version, Silicon, with 24 hours of uptime listed on one unit's Task Manager, which is quite impressive considering I remember when the first Meteor Lake laptops were shown off, their uptimes, I swear it was Kit Guru. Leo at Kit Guru is like, he didn't see one like above a couple hours, meaning they're constantly crashing and being rebooted. But the market ETA is first half of 2026. The Panther Lake Showcase was the one exciting part of Intel's CES 2025 presence, besides maybe the 140T. We can compare to Intel's Meteor Lake Showcase in March 2023, and it seems to be in an earlier stage, but performing much better so far. Also, the other positive note was Intel showed off Arrow Lake APUs. I believe like the 285H, 265H that had 8 Xe cores, and at least they claim it had parity with the Ryzen AI 9 365 APU. Now, this Strix APU is the 12 compute unit variant, to be fair, but this is far and above what I expected. I expected Hawk Point performance, maybe. This looks like decent performance for the 140T GPU tile, and more interesting as well, it seems to be a different tile from the 8 Xe core Battle Mage tile on Lunar Lake. As far as I can tell, this might be Alchemist plus, like the Alchemist Plus from Meteor Lake with more XMX or whatever added from Battle Mage, but not using Battle Mage. That's what people are telling me behind the scenes it is at Intel, but I still find it interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think that we talked about this, and this is where I will plug the latest Die Shrink, which again, you get access to for just $2 a month on Patreon, where we went through all of Intel's CES press conference. A big portion of that was me and Dan talking about the 140T and how it's like, again, it's kind
not
of
really that much.
It's kind of like Alder Lake, right, versus Rembrandt. Yes, Rembrandt is like 30-50%, I don't know off the top of my head, faster than the Tiger Lake / Alder Lake integrated graphics. But the fact that Alder Lake got Tiger Lake's graphics, which were like MX250 performance, meant that all APUs minimum now the developers will program for are like way beyond what they used to be. And hey, look, if this is better than Hawk Point, and that's what most Arrow Lake laptops will have, that's minimum performance to play AAA games in all laptops, and that will affect the minimum performance that we see out of games on PC, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it really sets a new minimum performance for laptops. That's, I would say, good enough. Which I don't know, maybe doesn't sound like the most rousing endorsement, but matching the 365 isn't bad. The 365 has pretty good gaming performance, all things considered, and maybe this could go into a couple handhelds, or the 140T is good enough to go into handhelds. But yeah, beyond that, I thought Intel had a pretty we talked about that a lot, had a pretty lackluster CES.
Outstanding.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I meant outstanding, not lackluster.
No, I was making fun of the announcer guy that cut off everyone. Like, while they were talking there, like they just be like, and this is why at Microsoft we think this could improve efficiency by 30%. Oh, it's just amazing. Like, he just like mutters. He's like, this is really good. Yep. Like cutting up. It was weird. It is funny if you want to watch it.
It was a very weird performance. Yeah. It was a very weird presentation.
And if you want to see Dan derail my train of thought by doing that to me several times, join the Patreon and listen to the Die Shrink. All right. Now let us move on to our final story number 7. SteamOS expands beyond Steam Deck. From Valve, with Lenovo's announcement at CES 2025 of the Lenovo Legion Go S. Why do they always do that? Lenovo's announcement of just say Legion Go S. We are pleased to share that their powered by SteamOS model is the first handheld officially licensed to ship with Valve SteamOS. We built this operating system to provide a seamless user experience optimized for gaming while retaining access to the power and flexibility of a PC. SteamOS is the same operating system we run on Steam Deck, and the team is making updates to ensure it fully supports the Lenovo Legion Go S and provides the same seamless experience customers expect. In addition, the same work that we are doing to support the Legion Go S will improve compatibility with other upcoming handhelds. Ahead of the Go S shipping, we will be shipping a beta of SteamOS, which should improve the experience on other handhelds that choose to install it. And users can download and test this themselves. And of course, we'll continue adding support and improving the experience with future releases. As we reported then, in Broken Silicon 288 in December, SteamOS has finally broken the containment of Steam Deck, with Lenovo's Legion Go S handheld being the first powered by SteamOS device. Furthermore, Valve is also leveraging the work they did to enable a seamless experience. Yeah. So yeah, I think this is really exciting. I mean, again, this is step one. Step one was the Steam Deck. They're making their own operating system.
Yeah.
The Steam Deck's a Trojan horse for getting it into people's hands and then making it. Step 2, expanding to OEMs. Lenovo now supports SteamOS. Step 3 will be widespread availability in challenging windows. Let's do it.
I'm very curious to see how this performs against other existing handhelds, because it really does seem like a lot of the handhelds powered by Windows were just not that impressive compared to the Steam Deck. Even if they beat it in performance, not on paper, there's like weird deficiencies that made the Steam Deck still better. So yeah, this is very exciting. And like 4 years from now, this could seem like the first step in something actually challenging Windows as the only viable OS if you want to game.
So again, I don't think there's much else to add about this, but I do think this is a big story.
Yeah, I'm just generally excited to see where SteamOS goes and if we actually see dedicated boxes in the next. I mean, it could probably this year. I would think.
We'll see.
You might start seeing them,
or again, more people screwing around with I installed SteamOS on my desktop and here's my results. Like David does a video, does it suck? And I hope it doesn't. Compressing iBox writes him, this is pretty open-ended, I guess, but how do you guys see the console landscape? Is it healthier than ever? Is it more boring than ever? Do you think it's going to burst with excitement at a Steam console? I think it's honestly a little boring right now, but that could just be nostalgia talking here. It's a little boring for us because we're the people that make money off of talking nonstop on a podcast. But if you're a gamer, it's never been better. It really has never been better.
I would say from a user experience perspective, definitely consoles are the best they've ever been. Like you said, from a competition perspective, it's a little boring where it's like, oh, one, Microsoft is really flailing right now. The Nintendo is on the cusp of saying something interesting, and Sony needs to get its studios more productive, which I think we're seeing that about to happen again. I think we're going to see more games come out from Sony Studios. So I think from that perspective, like all of these companies get your shit together a little bit, but user experience is good.
Yeah, but like here's an example. I was sitting on the couch a few nights ago and I wanted to play Mount & Blade Bannerlord, but I did it. I was like, you know what? I wish I could play that on the PlayStation. I'm like, didn't they announce I was going to PlayStation? And I looked, oh, it is. And so I'm like, screw it. I bought Bannerlord on PlayStation 5, and in performance mode, it seems to with the PS5 Pro. I checked, it's like running at around 100 frames per second to like at 1800p. 500 player battles. You can go into a fidelity mode with 1,000 player battles. And it just works. It works just as well as PC. The only point I would make is it is very clear this was a PC centric team that did what they had to put it on console. Everything's a little small on screen, and it's clear you're just using the analog stick as a mouse in the overworld sometimes, which doesn't make a difference in how easy it is to play. The combat doesn't change. That's where you need to be fast. But it is a little goofy. But I mean, it works.
That navigation, it can.
It get wonky on PC too. By the way, they've hidden buttons to speed up time
oh yeah,
and then once you figure it out, you're like, oh, I could go 4 times speed. My life is saved. But think about that. That's like a PC only game for a while. The Mount & Blade series that they just ported to it just works. I mean, so look. It's never been a better time to game on a console. And, I actually will take the time to say this as well. There wasn't room to make this really a story, but I've heard from a few developers behind the scenes that now have Switch 2s. It's great that the performance really does get around a Series S, but with better ray tracing. The CPU isn't really holding it back in a big way. That they think AAA games are going to run on this. And so again,
yeah, that sounds impressive for
an 8 nanometer, at least based on 8 nanometer originally APU. And so think about that. Even the Nintendo console is probably going to get widespread AAA support and be able to much more effortlessly than before be programmed to run all modern games. That's a world where, yes, it's not a 4090 or soon a 5090, but it is a world where it always used to be a choice. Are you on when you're using a console, get ready to give up all this stuff, and it's you're just giving up graphics that sometimes, and that's how I would say it. And we need more competition to make the discussions more interesting, because all it is right now is it's who should buy the Switch 2? Do you want a Nintendo handheld? That's who should buy it. Do you want a home console? Do you? Then get a PS5. you have the money, get a PS5. Do you want a game above 1080p consistently, often in 4K? Get a PS5 Pro. I can't really recommend Xbox anymore. That they seem to be throwing that out. But
do you want to spend however much it is for Game Pass every month and only use Game Pass? Get an Xbox.
Yeah, I mean, and then even though you can just use it on PC, but like that, it's boring because it's easy to tell people what to get, but it's easy because they made good products. And it will become more interesting again when SteamOS comes, hopefully, with more dedicated products. And who knows? Maybe Xbox will pull a rabbit out of a hat and make something very interesting. Again, I hear they're making another console. All right, let us now move on to section number 8, which is the wrap up. Sorry, you can tell I'm getting tired here, people. So these are, of course, the stories that we do not think needed their own discussion, but at least are worth mentioning. Yes, this is worth mentioning. Did you see Dell also copied Apple's naming scheme like AMD?
Oh, yeah.
They got rid of XPS, and then they're just like, this is going to be the Pro and the Pro Max. Like, so you can get a Strix Pro Max, a Strix Halo AI Pro Max with a Pro Max Dell, and we can all just be Pro Max.
Pro.
But
I mean, you need to kill your branding every once in a while, Tom. Why continue a brand that's been pretty successful for like 30 years?
Generally speaking, I hear people say good things about the XPS, but I don't know. So yeah, they just have, it's a Dell, then it's a Dell Pro, then a Dell Pro Max. Pick a word. The R5 9600 was revealed by AMD, and no one is talking about it because of how much news there are, but also probably because we knew that was going to come eventually. So yep, a budget 6 core is coming. AMD, I saw trashed Intel by just saying there's 9800 X3D shortages because our competition can't make good products.
Why not? I mean, that is where we're at this point.
But that's the thing, is I leaked that the 9800 X3D would have high availability, and it did. It sold like crazy, and it's coming out like, those leaks, I think, by Tech Epiphany and Mind Factory numbers. I thought I saw it sold like 10,000 in a day at this retailer. And there's these people, there's people who still, that we've had to deal with since Ampere and RDNA 2's launch, do not understand supply and demand. Low, being hard to buy does not mean low supply if demand is high. The 9800 X3D is just like outselling all Intel processors combined, and that is why it's hard to get. And
yeah,
that's AMD playing into that. Intel is going to apparently spin off their RealSense depth camera business. So there goes another part of the company I didn't know they had. They're getting rid of.
I mean, yeah, no thoughts on there. Just
okay.
I added this one, but I just saw, they're spinning off more of their company. Worth noting.
Yeah. Also, re-reviews have come out of the Arc B580, and it seems like everyone has come around to what this channel got trashed for saying, which is the B580 has tons of bugs, tons of problems, inconsistent performance, and isn't worth buying above $250, which I believe is now being noted by most tech tubers now. Oh, look, it doesn't seem to really be $250, and there seems to be no availability, because if Intel were to make a lot of these, they would go bankrupt.
I mean, it's the best budget graphics option if you're willing to spend $150 over MSRP and buy a 9800 X3D for your CPU.
It's the best budget 9800 X3D graphics card.
It's the best budget, non-budget GPU on the market.
Let's see here. I also point this out here. There's a leak here. Who was the spy on Twitter? It's from some Chip Hell leak, and it shows different games and the frame rates for like the 4080 Super. Now, from what I actually checked before recording, this doesn't seem to be the same settings that I saw in the AMD leak I just did, but it shows here, let's see, 40. Yeah, so like Black Myth Wukong, we have the 4080 Super gets 33 frames per second in 4K. I'm assuming this is max ray tracing. The 9070 XT gets 30. The 4070 Ti Super gets 28. Like, these aren't the same settings and exact frame rates I saw. This is in line with where I'm seeing the cards.
So, yeah, that's consistent.
So this further backs up what I'm hearing. Which again, it's the whole time we've been saying XT to XTX raster, which remember, the XTX is better in raster than the 4080 Super. And then, almost 4080, maybe 4070 Ti, 4070 Ti Super ray tracing. And then the final thing here is just kind of interesting. I did see Tim at Hardware Unbox looked at this as well. This is a bendable monitor, so you can choose to have it be in curved mode or not. I will say it was interesting watching it bend back and forth in a video, but I do feel like you might save $500 and just get if you want it to be bent or not. Like, why would you buy this? And isn't it always going to be bent or not?
Or can you choose the degree of bend it has?
There's like different stages. So yes, that would be the most useful thing is a slight curve to this 21:9 monitor. I would like more than the stupid burp.
Because I do have to say, I had to go to Best Buy today, and I saw the most bent
boy
monitor I've ever seen. Like it was like woo, like it was like a
16:9
full panoramic view. I don't think it was 16:9. It looked like it was an extended display, but I didn't look that closely.
Because I think the ones
that's a way bigger bend than it needs to
be.
Like
32:9 at least is what you want for the curve. I think. Like you want it. 2 monitors at least, and frankly, almost 3, and that is where it makes sense to have the curve. Anything else, 16:9 especially. I can, and it sucks because I've seen some companies take like an OLED or whatever screen, and then it's like the resolution and the frame rate I want, and then they're just like, and it's curved at 16:9. I'm like, oh, guess I'm not buying it.
I have no clue why you would want a 16:9 monitor curved. The shortest where it doesn't look incredibly stupid to me is 21:9, and even that I would rather just have a flat 21:9 display.
Yeah. All right, Dan. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. Any final words? We don't have any final reader mails. We thought we'd keep this as a not less fat, because I don't think we ever throw anything on that's not worth it. We'll say the calories of this episode were very lean.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
More than six stories, got to the point.
Yeah, we got to the point, and I don't know if it's too late to say this at this point, because we're 2 weeks into the new year when this comes out, but Happy New Year, I guess.
Well, that's true. Like, because this is the first episode that isn't a die shrink, the first like non-Patreon episode that's come out with you. Yes, everybody, Happy New Year.
Oh, I suppose a different episode has already come out without me.
Yes, which we didn't say Happy New Year in that one, though. So there you go, everybody.
Yeah, so I needed to say it.
Happy New Year. There, you got it. Got it.
Bye.
Happy New Year. But thank you for watching.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, subscribe to Moore's Law Z on YouTube. Like the video. Share this video. Comment down below. Tell us what you think. I'm sure many of you will continue to share your opinions. We've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes. I'm sure you didn't disagree with us on anything. But if you did, be sure to tell us in the comments. Or tell us, what you do agree with. If there's something out of left field that you think people will miss too, then they might see that and go look into it. And then, of course, also consider joining the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. You get access to that die shrink that's been mentioned that just came out, and hundreds of other die shrinks, never with any ads. You can get access to all those at the lowest tier. Also, it gets you the ability to ask guest questions. Your new guest episode is coming up. And at the right tiers, you can ask free questions for the live streams. You get early ad-free versions of Broken Silicon and so many other things. But, I'm starting to ramble. I am tired. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And have a good week, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Craw and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About /
support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guests questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Midland, Drita Full, Z Jits, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, MJB1, GZ Ziggy, SNES Chalmers, Toka, Jerem Ferrier, Valcom Lev, Jensen Wayne, Gregory Sacker, Sarcastro, Chris Strick, Evan Dingle, Compressed AI Blocks, Hal Booma, Shredbird, Holden Mobley, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boss Haas, Chrysantine, Jonathan, Franco Frederick, Jake 223, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Neithra Zink, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooden, Mad, Zootsuit Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Jamie Witters, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Aisha, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Cole Addict, Cameron, Ajay Shang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Mai Sharona, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Win Wang, Winstar, Corey Leonard, James I. Raider, Little Germany, Shay, JSMMH, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Justin Bustle, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Harlan, Jason Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushby, Himsa Gung, Tails 2299, Mio Val, Verga, Sisyphos 771, The Forbidden Juice, Brian Wright, RB Racer, Alex Vega, Dr. J. Met, Freedy, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Jeffrey Gentleman, Crystal Joe, Elbergun, Kikum, Solarized 80, Thalo 215, Matthew Marlowe, Brian P, Sprutnik Hudat 42, Coinster 671, Penta Winta, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, Angel of Cake, Mr. Tiger, John with Boomstick, Porcelain Oats, Curry King 3, Nick Zuzmania, Sakosha, State Farm Steak, Armando Baca Chura, Rye, Hill, Cheap Bowls, Kevin, Kuntz, Stope, and of course, as always, thank you to Sahara for the music.